All right, we are live at the Deadly Analysis podcast. I don't know why I start every podcast that way. Yo, we're live. It's a strange thing I do. So today we're doing something a little different than we do in some of our other podcasts. We're going to do a kind of a quick review, discussion, analysis, who the hell knows sort of thing about the new 2017 Andy Muschietti's It remake. I saw this last week in the theater. I'm curious to get our co-host thoughts. I'm here with Shayra and Ben, pretty much our normies. I'm just going to call them the Losers Club, like all three of us. Antonio's sort of a loser, so he's part of the Losers Club, but we're essentially losers, and this is our club. So thank you for watching and joining in this club where we discuss clown films like this. That's one of the things I want to get into today is other good clown films. This is a good one, I think, but I think there's better ones. So I saw the movie last week. I saw it with a couple friends, some people screaming, some teenagers going crazy, which kind of killed some of the vibe for me. But I'll start by saying I liked this movie. I thought it was good, and that's where it kind of ends for me. And I can't tell if that's my criticism of the film or if I'm applauding the film. I felt like everything in the movie was really good. I'll even say really good. But I left a little disappointed, and I'm not entirely sure why. I clearly know part of it is because I'm a hipster when it comes to horror movies. I have standards, and this one sort of did not reach those standards, but that could just be me. I felt like the film was not really scary. It didn't hit my sort of fear schema. There's a lot of pop-out sequences. In fact, most of the fear sequences in this are pop-out-ish in nature, at least in my opinion. Some were, I'd say most were fairly predictable, but that doesn't necessarily make the film bad, right? Like, the film is not bad at all to me. It's a good film, but it didn't have that thing, that oomph that made it stand out in the same way
the it factor.
The it factor. It didn't have it. It did not have the it factor. Wow, so meta. The acting was great, right? The Losers Club kids were great. Bill Skarsgård, I actually think he did a really good job as It. I have some quibbles with Pennywise, rather, but I have some quibbles about how his demeanor was selected to sort of be. The big problem I had with this is that when I saw the miniseries when I was a kid, and we talked about this, I think, in some of our other episodes, you don't get the vibe that Tim Curry is like this menacing evil monster the moment you look at him. Whereas with Bill Skarsgård, the moment you see the motherfucker, he looks like he's ready to eat your face off at every scene. And you lose something in that. I think when you watch the original, you know there's something untrustworthy and evil and malevolent about Pennywise. But in this one, it's on its sleeve. You know what I mean? He wears it on its sleeve, which is, I guess, an appeal to some. But for me, I liked at least the initial, what the hell is that? That's really freaky. It's a clown, right? It's clearly a killer, demonic, evil clown the moment you look at Pennywise from the first scene. And that took away something for me. I don't know. What did you guys think? Let's start with particularly Pennywise, the differences between the Pennywise in this version and in the original. Did you like Tim Curry's better, or did you like Bill Skarsgård better, and why?
I'll go. So you guys know my main fear is clowns. I was not scared of this movie at all. At all.
Oh, that's interesting.
I did not jump. I did not scream. I didn't even have moments where I was like, oh no. I was just sitting there like, I mean, yeah, he's an evil clown. Like, whatever. The main thing that scares me about clowns is the same thing that scares me about an Easter Bunny or a Santa Claus or any other random possible pedophile in a suit that's supposed to look all cute. Like, the thing that scares me is that it seems like something that you should be okay with, that should be fun. And it's not. There's someone very sinister underneath that. And so it took away the fear factor for me. And, like, that sucks because my main fear is clowns. So this should have really been frightening. And what's funny is there's a character from the film whose fear was clowns. And he didn't even seem afraid of clowns. He was just like, oh, fuck you, you try to fuck with me. You know, of course he screamed a couple of times, but if I saw a puppet of myself with maggots crawling out of it, I'd probably shit myself a little. But he was like, I'm tough, I'll fuck you up, Pennywise. And I'm like, yeah, see, even he's not afraid of this clown. Because he is wearing his stuff on his sleeve, so it's just not as scary to me. But yeah, that's Tim Curry scared the shit out of me. Just
Yeah,
FYI.
same here. So we're on the same page, totally.
I'm going to have to agree with that. And there's a particular reason why I think the original It is so scary that sort of plays into why the new one probably isn't so scary. And this gets into some Freudian stuff, right? So like you have Freud's theory of like the uncanny, where you have like the familiar, and then you sort of combine that with the unfamiliar, and that ends up resulting in sort of like this weird sort of like fear and terror that you have. So in this case, I think with a clown, the impression that you're supposed to get, the familiar aspect of that is going to be the innocence and kind of that symbol of joy and of fun. But then you sort of combine that with this predatory monster, and that's why it's scary. You know, in the Tim Curry version, he totally played on that. He did seem innocent. He seemed fun. His voice sounded like, you know, you might expect a clown to sound like. He did silly things. He acted in sort of a goofy way right up to the point where he was actually attacking you. But with Bill Skarsgård, yeah, he was terrifying the entire time. And it really seems like the only time that he showed up was to actually attack the Losers Club and like the other children around town. You know, I mean, it totally relied on jump scares as opposed to like sort of like a deeper psychological thing. He really didn't seem to show up to torment the kids in any way. Like it wasn't like, you know, he was there to just kind of like mess with you and mess with you and mess with you to build up your fear. He was literally just there to rip your arm off. And so, yeah, because of that sort of like that aspect that I feel like they lost there. Yeah, totally not as scary in terms of the It character itself.
Yeah, there's a viscerality, I think, to Bill Skarsgård, his Pennywise, which I think I get the appeal on paper, right? Like if you're Andy Muschietti and you're directing this, you're going to want to try to do something unique. And this is the dance this is why I can forgive this It film a little bit, because trying to recreate a classic like this is impossible. It's just utterly impossible. So I think the approach on paper to be like, okay, let's make him as creepy as we can, and throw that out there as kind of our own way of doing it. I get the appeal of that on paper, but you definitely lose something when you do that, right? And I think we're hitting on this. You lose that. You give the Freudian angle. I think it also could be kind of cashed out as, you know, kind of our social fear of disguise, right? Like that's it for me with clown films, is that there's a fear of disguise. There's a fear of a facade. There's a fear of people. It's the same fear, I think, I would argue, in the movie Creep of all films, where there's a disguise, there's a distrust, there's something behind there, and I think it's exacerbated by the fact that a clown, again, is a jovial, happy, fun, balloon blowing up sort of creature that makes kids happy, right? Plus, I think we have social things that come into this, like who's the serial killer, the fucking serial killer with clowns? Yeah,
Gacy.
So, Gacy, John Wayne Gacy. So yeah, I mean, so there's these sort of social components that come in too, where you have a facade, right? And there's no facade in Bill Skarsgård's It. Bill Skarsgård's It. You're right. He shows up and it's just tearing arms off. And there are scenes where he does try to produce fear in the kids through their own little, you know, through the Jewish kid who has the fear of the painting and all of that stuff. But that to me was downplayed significantly in this film. It wasn't the production of the fear so much as it was Pennywise in front of you. Now, that said, there was a scene in this movie that I thought was actually really well done. There's a lot of scenes that I thought were well done, but the one that stands out from Pennywise's perspective is the scene where Pennywise comes out of the fridge upside down, and he kind of stands up, and the acting when he starts slowly doing this, and he goes, I think it's to Richie? I forget who it's to, but he starts doing this and goes like this. That actually scared me. Like that was the only time in the theater that I think I felt a little freaky, and it goes to what, in part, I think I get scared of, which is like the knowingness of what's coming next, like the sort of it's that slow psychological torment. Like Bill Skarsgård could have, or I should say Pennywise could have just went and devoured him right there, but he didn't. He like took his time and did this, and then he starts pretending like he's going to bite his hand. Like that's what I needed throughout the rest of the film. I needed that. I'm going to play with you in a way that's somewhat psychological, not just like literal. Like he actually didn't bite his arm. He was the complete opposite of Georgie. With Georgie, he just ripped his fucking arm off. It didn't scare me at all. It was like shocking and visceral, but like there was more fear in pretending that he was going to bite the other kid's hand off, which I thought was interesting. That's me, right? That's just me. The girls screaming next to me wouldn't shut the fuck up about Georgie. So who knows? Maybe they're right and I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, they're absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Okay, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, there are definitely like little elements of it where it does sort of show up sometimes. Like when you're talking about, and I think that was actually Eddie, right? So they're in the house, and Eddie like falls through onto the table, and like he busts up his arm, and Bill and Richie, I think, are still upstairs, and they're like getting ready to go through the doors. Like there's that stuff like crawling across the floor at them, and they got to pick. Which, by the way, I mean that particular scene, yeah, that was really interesting actually, where they had to pick one of 3 doors, and one of them was like not scary at all, scary, extremely scary. And what's interesting there, like symbolically, is that yes, I mean they picked the one that was not scary at all, and then when they opened it up, they had like this girl that was hanging there missing her legs, but they shut the door and then they opened it back up again to face that. They didn't pick a different door. They didn't try something else. They're like, okay, we've got to do this. We're going to face this fear. And that's kind of like when you see where Pennywise stops attacking Eddie and he turns around, he can kind of like sense that. And I think that's really interesting too, just about the character in general, is where, they definitely emphasized at least that it needs those children to be afraid before he can really kind of exercise his power. And so that was pretty good actually. And just sort of playing into kind of like the overall film, having really good sort of like visual elements and being like interesting to watch, even if it did sort of fall short on some of the other kind of like more subtle symbolic aspects that I personally was looking for.
So we got a comment actually from Mr. Cam 124. He says, I think that one of the biggest problems with the film is Pennywise's inconsistency as Pennywise. I think his character sets up an initial dichotomy and fails to maintain that throughout the film. And so I asked him, like, what was the dichotomy? And he says that his scene with Georgie makes it seem like he's a character capable of withdrawing sympathy from his victims and from the audience, because he's childlike and oscillates between that and being evil. And then after the Georgie scene, he never returns to that dichotomy. And I feel like the potential depth of the character of Pennywise is sacrificed as a result. That is a really, really good point. I mean, it's at the beginning of the movie, of all places, where it sets up. It is kind of having that. Well, and maybe that's what part of the disappointment was, is that interaction leads you to believe early on in the film that there is going to be that connection with the psychological fear, that malevolence that understands what it's like to be a child. And through dialogue, right? You kind of need that. Tim Curry was fucking fantastic with that. He was written to do that so well in the miniseries. And anything after that scene with Georgie in this new one was just more visceral than anything else. Really, really good comment.
Yeah, I think that there could have been way better interactions with the kids. Something that scares me more than clowns is child actors. They are so frightening to me when they're put in movies, because so many kids cannot act, and it ruins films all the time. And with that many child actors, I was expecting things to go really, really wrong. There were some parts that were kind of but there were some really amazing performances by a lot of these kids. And when I was watching Georgie, I was really concerned about him because he's so adorably cute. He did manage to look pretty scary at times. But it was kind of funny. I was laughing when Georgie was trying to be scary, so that kind of ruined it for me. He's like, ha 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 ha. I was like, he's so cute. Look at him try to be scary. Like, it didn't scare me. So, but I think he tried. I think the kid did give a good try, to be creepy and scary. I don't know what they could have done though to really add that factor for Georgie. He's just so adorable. So
they literally had to add that CGI effect where his face was melting just because he was too cute, right? Like, he was just like, you'll float too, and you're like, oh, you cute little son of a bitch. And they're like, okay, this
is the CGI does not make it scarier. No.
Yeah, they're like, okay, we got to make his face melt. Dan from graphic effects, get over here. That's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah, I think he tried. I did think he tried to perform in a scary way, but he's just too adorable, so it kind of fell flat, at least for the fear factor. But there were some really good performances. I really liked Beverly. I don't know who the actor is who played Beverly, but fantastic performance by her. And I liked that the film had a kind of Stranger Things, Goonies kind of feel to it. It was nostalgic for me, at least.
That's my criticism. I wanna throw this out here.
But it was not as good as those things, so you are kind of comparing it. So
yeah, like, okay, so this was my pet peeve. It bugs me, and I'm going to sound so fucking hipster for this, but there's this trend now to couch lot of cinema and a lot of shows in 80s context now because it's so nostalgic, right? And they even had the same fucking kid from Stranger Things, one of the actors from Stranger Things in it, right? That bugged me too, because I was like, in my head, I'm going straight. There's always like a Stranger Things moment whenever I saw Richie. I was like, beep, beep, Richie, get back to Stranger Things. But yeah, no, like there's this, it's easy to make people feel nostalgic and have them confuse it with elements of the film being good. Like, I feel like a lot of people are going to leave going, oh, it felt like Goonies, very 80s. Basically, anytime you see a bunch of kids in their underwear jumping into a quarry, it's a fucking 80s film. It's an 80s film. So, like, it really couched this entire film so heavily in that context that I feel it was it was trying to mess with me, make me feel nostalgic, right? Because, the miniseries isn't in the 80s, or, when they're kids, it's not in the 80s or anything. So it's easy to do that nowadays, I feel like. I felt like it was kind of I don't know. It felt like I kind of felt like I was trying to be taken advantage of by having a degree of nostalgia bred into the film as kind of, because it's easy to confuse that with thinking the film is good. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just so super skeptical of shit that's what I felt like was happening. I don't know.
Well, I totally agree with that. I think they were doing that on purpose, absolutely. And it could have turned out to be a good thing. And I really think that's part of one of the reasons why the It story in general is so good, because once again, like, we come back to that thing that's familiar, but the job of kind of like the writers there and the actors is to take that nostalgia and that thing that you love so much and just absolutely just twist it and distort it and make it unrecognizable. And they just didn't drive, once again, that fear piece, the correct type of fear. They didn't drive it home well enough.
I was waiting for a scary jump scare involving New Kids on the Block the whole fucking time. I was waiting for it to happen and it never did. I'm like, why are you even bringing up New Kids on the Block here? Like, what is the point of this? You're just mentioning it so that I, a past New Kids on the Block listener will go, oh, please don't go, girl. I know that song. What a reference. And I was like, where's this creepy? How are they going to make that fun part of my childhood scary? They didn't do it. What a missed opportunity. I was so upset about that.
Yeah, there was. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say there are a couple ways that they do they get into that, though, that I think they actually did a pretty good job, right? So if you think about it, in the story, there's two different ways that I think they really, or Stephen King, let's just take this back to the book for a second. There's two ways that he uses this story to really kind of like dig into the nature of fear here. And I think one of those is through the clown in the macro sense, because like you're thinking about kids, you're thinking about innocence, at least in the first part of the book where you're talking about kids, right? Like when it gets into adults, it's sort of a totally different thing, but I won't like sort of go into that right now. But so you have that innocence there. And like, obviously you have this distortion of that aspect. But with each of the individual children, there's another way that you get at that too. And I think it's the concept of home, because what's more familiar than that safe space that you should be able to retreat to get away from kind of like the everyday horrors of life, essentially. But for each of the kids, that's sort of been distorted to a point where they can no longer rely on that, right? So you have Bill, and he explicitly comes out in a really good scene and says whenever he goes home, all he can think about is that Georgie's not there. And I mean, talking about the child acting too, I mean, it's fantastic. I think he just did that so well. But also, I mean, obviously you have Beverly, when she goes home, she has to be terrified of her father. Whenever Eddie goes home, he has to worry about like his overbearing, overprotective mother who essentially is basically there just to weaken him to the point where she can control him. With each of the kids, you have this element. And I mean, I think that they do a pretty good job of getting into that, even if it's not, I don't think they do it enough. Like, I mean, it's not done for every single child the way that it needs to. And actually, there were some interesting differences between the old movie or the miniseries and the new movie, like where you have Mike, who his entire personality and storyline is completely changed, where it's like Ben in the new one, who's kind of the historian. That's supposed to be Mike. He's supposed to be the smart one that has the history of the town, who becomes the librarian eventually. But in the new one, he kind of goes back home to this thing where he has to like, he has to shut off his empathy, I guess, and like kill sheep. And that's pretty interesting whenever you talk about sort of that dichotomy and sort of ruining kind of like that familiar home environment. But anyway, like it's an interesting difference there. But that's the entire point, I think, of the movie, right? So like with the Losers Club, I think what they come to is that, of course, they develop that new sense of home with each other. That becomes their new safe space, and you definitely get that camaraderie. And I think a big part of that is because of the chemistry between the actors that they're able to portray.
And they didn't all have to have sex together, so that was good.
They did look at her boobs at one point in time, though, until she turned and looked at them, and they're like, "What's up in the sky?"
Yeah, I actually heard someone criticize the film for like, well, you know, you have all these because it's Stephen King, right? So you're gonna have all these Stephen King nuts that are like, well, they took this out or took that out. That wasn't in there. I'm like, dude, how how are they gonna show that, or do you really want to see that? Like, that's kind of freaky.
Yeah, I think that they tried with the shortened time period. We know we're gonna have a chapter 2 coming up, so obviously that'll fill in some of the blanks, and we know that those actors are gonna come back to, go back to the 80s again at certain points in time. So it's not completely, we're not completely done with 1989, but I feel like there was still a lot lost in the first half, and I don't know. It made me kind of uncomfortable. Like, I hope that they try to fill in the blanks with some of the stuff like that I remember from the book, but maybe it was just that it was put in the 80s that it confused the things. I don't know. And like the bullies were just not believable for 80s bullies. They were believable for like maybe 50s bullies, but not 80s bullies. I don't know. It was kind of confusing.
He did have a mullet, Shayra.
He did, just like you, huh?
Just like me in the 80s. In case you don't know, I'm never showing that photo again. That was awful. Yeah, I feel like overall, what's so interesting for me is I feel like I'm really hard on this film. I feel like I'm very critical of it. And I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I mean, I like Stephen King. I've read like maybe two. I've read It in high school, and Misery, and I think like Parts of the Mist, and that's it. So I'm not a huge Stephen King fan, but I still kind of felt like all the stuff I would typically praise a film for is kind of a criticism to me in this film. I'm not entirely sure why. I felt like, I mean, definitely there was a lot of hype surrounding this film. A lot of scenes got leaked and people kind of freaked out about like Georgie's death and things like that. But I just was so unimpressed with it. And I don't know. It's really hard for me to articulate. I mean, I think we're doing something like a good job trying to articulate the differences and stuff. But, you know, you guys mentioned, I think it was Ben mentioned that what for me is usually a key indicator of what scares me in a film. And that is, at least part of it is having a shitty home life. Like if all of the films, in case all of our viewers don't know, we review what we think are all our scariest films, and then we try to assess and talk about why, and we end up producing these kind of fear schemas with each other, with ourselves. And there's all these same sort of trends that we start to see in some of the films that scare us. And for me, I'm the most obvious fucking example of that. One of them has, and I didn't notice this till Shayra pretty much sent me a bill for $300 and told me, you know, this is me lying on a couch. That a lot of my films don't have problems with parents. The parents aren't shown in the films. They're blurry in the films. They don't have a presence. And this movie had that, like really had that, but it didn't scare me. And the only thing I can think of is that it was so far in the background. The psychological stuff was so far removed in the background because you had these expectations of maybe seeing the clown in the next sequence. Like you wanted to kind of like, you felt like the movie was getting you ready to just keep seeing the clown. And that was the fear. And like, here we go. And we're going to now be by the well. And we know we're going to see the clown now. That the background work wasn't all there and didn't really do it for me. I don't know. Just throw that out there.
I think I know why it wasn't that scary to me. I had a pretty fucked up home life back at home when I was growing up, so I was expecting them to really portray the scary home lives in a way that, you know, added the fear factor, especially since they turned Pennywise into like stuff of nightmares. So I was like, oh, they're probably gonna up the ante with the parents. No, the dad gave me that feeling, like, I don't know if this is gonna be a weird reference or not, but Bill and Ted's Bogus Journeys, when they go to hell, like the characters are really like, I'm gonna get you, duper duper duper, and you're like, what are you? Like, is this supposed to be reality? And like the mom, Eddie's mom, reminded me of like a bumbling character from Harry Potter. You know, it wasn't scary at all. It was like they were goofy. It was kind of funny. I was laughing at them, and I don't know if they were supposed to be scary in this movie, but they weren't.
I actually think one of the scariest sequences was when the pharmacist looked at Betty and said, "Oh, you remind me of Lois Lane." I was like, "Well, okay, now I'm scared. Fuck Pennywise."
Yeah, apparently she just brings the old dudes in. I don't know. Like, her character has some fucked up situations with older dudes. That was kind of creepy. I don't know if that was meant to be creepy, though.
I think so. I think that was meant to be creepy. Actually, one of the few times I give it to the film kind of freaked me out. That was kind of nasty. That was probably nastier than Georgie getting his arm ripped off. I don't know. So we got a comment here. It's a question, and I think it goes back to Ben's earlier comment. I'm not even going to try and pronounce her name. Homie says, is there, I don't know why I said homie, that makes no sense. Is there a balance to be had to try and stay true to the source material and artistic license for better horror? Some things seem to work better with our imagination in book form rather than creating a visual representation of the text. Absolutely, on my view. I think that's part of the large appeal for people who read Lovecraft, right? I love Lovecraft, and part of the appeal is imagination as the key indicator of the horror in certain components of the short stories or in some of the movies. This film, I felt like, was kind of the opposite. It gave you too much. Maybe I'll cash it out that way. It gave you too much of Pennywise. It produced a narrative that you had no choice but to be like, this is the scariest motherfucking clown that they're trying to make. When it pops out of the when Pennywise comes out of the projector, clearly there is, I felt like the scene right before where Pennywise pops out of the projector, where it's just the flip thing and he's flipping his hair and he's got that sadistic smile, that was scarier to me, way scarier than when Pennywise jumped through the projector screen. And I think part of the appeal there is the what's beneath, what's behind, letting that linger and sit, letting your imagination run wild with the kind of demonic thing that you're looking at, as opposed to 5 fucking seconds later, which was still scary, but it was scary in a pop-out sense of him popping through the fucking screen and coming at you. Maybe one of the few times I'll actually give 3D film. I didn't see it in 3D. I don't even know if it came out in 3D. Maybe one of the few times I think being in a 3D theater would have been kind of cool. I hate 3D films, but I was thinking to myself, that would have been fucking cool. I don't know. Just like bring someone I know who gets scared of that shit and just look over at them with my 3D glasses. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about the 3D thing, I mean, another good scene for that would be where it gets stabbed in the head and like you see the blood spatter the screen. Totally would have been perfect for 3D, absolutely. But going back to artistic license, so I agree with that. Yes, I think there needs to be some kind of like some sort of foundation and anchoring into the source material, at least enough to provide a scaffold. And yes, the director and the actors do have artistic license, but to add some nuance here, I think the reason that I'm disappointed that they didn't stick with the source material more and go with some of the development there is because they traded that off for jump scares. So if they had developed it in a different direction with a little more of kind of like the subtle psychological fear, totally would have been fine, because that would have been scarier and it would have been a lot more interesting. But the fact that they decided to take their artistic license in such a superficial direction, that's my problem with it.
Yeah, I did read a lot of Stephen King growing up because, as you guys know, I wasn't able to watch scary movies up until I was like much older than you guys when you first started. And so my way of watching scary movies was reading scary books, because apparently my parents didn't really think about that factor. So yeah, Stephen King, I was reading it constantly. The Stand, my copy of The Stand became shredded to bits because I read it so many times. So I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and a lot of his shit is getting in your head, is messing with your mind. Nothing about this film did that. It was just like, ooga booga, ooga booga. And I was like, are you trying to scare a toddler? Like, what are you, like, what is this crap? And that's the problem with going away from the source material. You could have changed every aspect of the story. I wouldn't have cared. But you have to at least have that element of how Stephen King gets in your head. It messes with you. And I think that there was a bit of a show. I think someone who helped make this film did not like saliva. There was an overabundance of phlegm in every aspect of this film. I don't know why. There was people spitting off of cliffs. There was a giant loogie monster coming at the kids through a mattress. When Pennywise is talking to Georgie, he's like drooling from his mouth. Popcorn, pop, 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 pop. And I'm like, what is all this drool? Like, what is this supposed to be scary? Like, why is there so much drool in this movie? I feel like there's something weird to this film. Like, they were trying to scare us through gross outs, but not do it well, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And it was annoying. I kind of felt frustrated, like, are you messing with me? What are you doing? It was annoying.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to kind of like some of the criticisms that we have, is that this is an in your face sort of film. It's a visceral sort of film, body stuff going on. You know what I mean? The part where I think where Pennywise, at least with Georgie initially, starts to drool, that was kind of cool. I dug that. But yeah, then it started like, I don't know, man. Maybe Andy Muschietti is like the Michael Bay of like saliva and like phlegm and shit. Maybe we got to watch his next few films and see if that happens. You know what I mean? I don't know.
In some aspects, it would have been totally acceptable. Again, like if they'd put it in the right context, right? Because you got to think about Eddie's fear, right? Like, I mean, his entire setup is that he's terrified of disease and sickness.
Ah,
and
there
that's
you go.
why when it appears to him, it's in the form of a leper. So like, I mean, there's a place for that in this movie, particularly because it pertains to one of the characters. But just like if it's going to be in general, yeah, that's a little cheap, right? Like, I mean, that's why a person would go to see a body horror movie. But then again, like, I mean, that's probably the most typical kind of like the horror that people would consider best on the large scale and like en masse. And just like even in those jump scenes, I do remember like in the theater, I saw this twice, both times I went to go see it. Like in those times when he would jump out of the projector or do like his big scary bits, like people would perceptibly all move in the same direction at the same time. So, I mean, there really was a reaction there. And that might've been part of it because I think this movie was meant to be, meant to appeal to kind of like the audience in general, like people in general. We might be a little bit of a fringe here, and I think we recognize that.
The only thing that was missing was him drooling when he was doing his little dance at the end. That would have been, if he just would have been doing his little jig with like drool coming down, that would have been the ultimate. That would have been it.
That was the worst part of the movie. I could not stand that part.
It was the only time for me that it was like clearly CGI. Like I guess Bill Skarsgård can't dance or something because it was clearly his face in someone else's body. And I shouldn't be allowed. It's 2017, folks. I shouldn't be allowed to notice that. Come on.
It was horrible, but it was fun. It's great to like make fun of it. It's a great way to point out where the shortcomings of this film are. The thing that really pissed me off though is, like I said, Beverly was so amazing with her performance. So he's doing this thing and she's actually acting and they keep going back and forth and I'm like, don't show me this shit and then show me someone acting well. That really adds to how bad this is. Like, you're not helping, movie. Whoever edited this in, you're just showing how bad the CGI is. So
God, think of the memes though, guys. I mean, that's fertile ground right there. That's going to be around for a while. That crazy little dance. Oh my God, the internet, it's going to stick. It's going to be there.
Yeah, I think it was you and I, Ben, who had that conversation where it was like, did they put this in there for that reason? Like, this is for the meme, right? You know, you have to do that thing, do it for the Vine, do it for the Vine. This is like, do it for the meme. Do it for the meme. Yep.
I hope that they actually actively knew to do that as opposed to just fucking it up and making it look like shit. And that's supposed to be such an intense part. You're supposed to get really scared during this part. And instead you're like, what the I started looking to strangers because I went by myself. I started looking at strangers like, are you looking at this fucking shit? Anybody else? Like, what? What is happening? So, I don't know. It was disappointing in parts, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. We got a comment here. Fellow said, I was torn because I connected with the actors and their ability to act, where when something happens, I viewed it as if I was one of the kids instead of like saying I'm scared. And he asks, is that wrong? That's interesting. It could be a connection. I mean, that could be just something on your end where you're able to identify with the skill that's involved in being an actor, a child actor, over and above placing yourself in the film. Or it could be that the film didn't do a good job of conveying that sort of thing well for you. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the kids acting, but I felt connected to the kids. I'll give this the film. One of the stronger points was the connection with the kids. I was able to kind of empathize, put myself in the perspective of the different characters. I was able to see their interactions largely in light of the story. And to that end, I tend to be the one, because I do this podcast, I'm looking for like, oh, are they shitty child actors too? So I'm looking for those sorts of things. So the film did that really well. And it's actually one of the harder things to do. I'll give credit where credit is due. That sort of interaction between characters, especially kids, is not easy to do. But even if it's done successfully, and I think this is the criticism we're all kind of finding, is that even if it's done well, you think of Goonies. You think of other things that have done it well too. It didn't have enough uniqueness to me to make it stand out. Now, I don't know how large of a criticism that is, because this is a very well-known, hard to remake Stephen King film. So I think there's probably like 30% is Noah being an asshole, 70% is I'm onto something sort of thing. Maybe I'll couch it in 70-30. I don't know.
I guess the real question is, are they going to be able to find adult actors that make us believe that they are the child actors? That is going to be the biggest challenge they have, and I guarantee they're going to fuck it up, and I can't wait to just destroy it. I'm going to be like, this is bullshit. Overanalyze the hell out of it. It's going to be hilarious.
I really hope that's not the case. Like, I'm really crossing my fingers that they're going to kill it with the adult version. That's kind of like why my one sort of like final ray of hope here is that I don't think they ruined this version. Like they easily could have. It was a lot better than I expected it to be. But if they absolutely just kill it with the adult version, yeah, I mean it's going to be fantastic. So please don't jinx it, please. I did want to say, though, going back to that question about the child actors, so placing yourself in their positions, yes, I mean, that absolutely could be an aspect of maybe just connecting with them because they act well and because it grabs your empathy. But the question that I would ask in return is, did you connect and see yourself as all of them, or was it particular children? Because there might be that aspect where, and I think that's actually in the comments a little bit, because, I mean, you might be seeing yourself in those positions because you sort of mirror elements of those particular fears.
Maybe that's why I like Beverly so much. I did see a lot of myself in a lot of the shit I went through.
Oh, there you go.
In her character, but of course I did that when I read it too. I felt like the child actor did a fucking fantastic job of being freaked out by hair globs pushing her towards a bloody sink. Man, that part in the book scared the shit out of me. I was afraid of drains for a while, and I think they did a fantastic job with that scene. In fact, that was the only scene where I was like, oh, okay, I know what I'm watching now. Like, it was done exactly how I would have imagined it when I was reading it in the book. So, the bloody bathroom and the like, you don't see the blood, and the dad like, no, what are you talking? What? It's like blood everywhere. It's exactly how it played out in my mind. So that scene was done fantastic.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if there was one character that he maybe identified with more. I think that says a lot, right?
Did you guys?
I did, actually. I did. Was it Eddie, the one who has the phobia of germs? Is it Eddie? Yeah. You're laughing.
You're a nerd.
Yeah, shut up, jerk. Yeah,
no,
like
great.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. I got his vibe more, and it's not like my upbringing at all. So it's not an upbringing thing. I don't know. I'm kind of a germaphobe too, a little bit. I'm overly clean. So I think part of it was that. But just his character also is being kind of like very quick-witted. I like to think of myself as being very quick-witted, folks. Being like very like he kind of struck me as like he's like he's a dry-humored, quick-witted smartass, and that's basically going to be like the epitaph that's going to be on my tombstone when I die. So yeah, I kind of identified with him a little more than any of the other characters. I also thought he was a really good actor too. He's actually in the scene that had one of the more psychological, terrifying things for me. Just is when he's running from the leper and then looks over and sees Pennywise. That kind of the iconic scene with all the balloons and like just that was one of the scenes I think Bill Skarsgård did a fantastic job. Was just the look. It always goes back for me. I'm realizing as we're talking, it always goes back to me to just not violence, the look, just the look on his face of it was almost like wasn't really even like well, maybe it's kind of like a psychotic look, but it was just kind of like a look like a tired look on Pennywise, kind of like I don't know. It's really I got to really think of how to describe that.
It's because he's not being desperate. I figured it out. Like the thing that made Tim Curry scary was he wasn't desperate. He's like, you're all gonna float down here. Eventually, I'll have you. And like this guy was like, I'm gonna get you. It's like, why are you so desperate to get me? Like, calm down. So that is exactly why. That is why he failed at being Pennywise. You hit it.
There was one scene, one time I think that he did it well, and it was in the beginning with Georgie when he has that look. It's like they're joking around and stuff, and suddenly his demeanor completely changes, and he has like that expression on his face where it's almost like kind of like tired, yes, but the way that I interpreted that was he's essentially looking at that child like food. And that's so creepy, and like it's I think it's hard to nail because like it as a human being, like it's going to be incredibly difficult to overcome sort of like that empathy you have and that natural feeling that most of us have that maybe like an actual psychopath might not. But yeah, so going from like that innocence and that mirth and that fun to viewing you as a source of nourishment, like I'm about to like devour this thing. Dude, I think that's what it was.
You fucking nailed it. You nailed it. That's exactly. I've looked at steaks the exact same way. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the looking through as a thing of objection. That is the look. That is the look. Get in my belly look. That iconic scene with all the balloons has now been depreciated into get in my belly. But I think that's right. That's what it is. Absolutely. Okay, so
wait, can we figure out who Ben is?
Oh, yeah.
I want to know who Ben is.
Yeah, who is? Yeah, come on, Ben.
All right,
we clearly got Betty and Eddie. You can't be Betty and Eddie. Like if this is a losers club meeting, you can't be the people we already picked. So you're left with the other characters.
I identify with Ben because his name is Ben, and because I've had best friends that stole my girl.
Done.
Do you write poetry? That's fantastic. I would have pegged both of you as possibly being a Richie because of the constant jokes, bunch of jokers. But yeah, I can see both of you. I could see both of you being the germaphobe and the hopeless romantic listening to New Kids on the Block.
Well, yeah, we have to tell Ben to turn it down every time we start a podcast. Fucking New Kids on the Block last. God.
Please don't go, girl. Oh my god.
So I got a question for you guys.
Oh,
I got a question for you guys. Other clown films that you like? Well, I guess for Shira, who has a fear of clowns, this may not be a good question.
Weirdly enough, I love clown movies though. So, yeah.
Okay, so other than give me one besides the original miniseries remake, a clown movie that maybe you think is superior to this, if you can.
Well, it's not even on the level of this, but I love Stitches. I think that film is fantastic. I know most people probably wouldn't appreciate it because it's a comedy, but and it's a weird, dark comedy at that. But there's lots of blood and funny jokes, and ice cream scooping someone's brain like into like a nice little dish, and then putting some hot fudge, which is actually blood, all over it, and eating the brain sundae. Like, that is fantastic stuff. And the clown is funny, wacky, scary, fun for the whole family, makes you never want to have children. It's a fantastic film. So,
but is it the same? So now I'm really curious, right? Is it does it draw on you? Because I think Stitches has a lot of comedic value in it. Does it draw on the same? Is it do you like it precisely because you can watch it and not be freaked the fuck out? Is that why you like it?
I was way more scared by Stitches than I was of this movie. But
really?
the thing that scared me was that I was actually empathizing with the fucking clown. I think that's scarier than anything because he was a dick. He was a giant dick, but I was like, man, children suck. Yeah. Fuck all these kids. Like, I felt like I was rooting for the clown the whole time. But I don't know. It just had a lot of gore and comedy. That's probably why I liked it, honestly. A gore and comedy is fantastic. And actually, if it was supposed to be a comedy, it might not have fallen so flat for me, honestly. Because I laughed way more times than I screamed or shrieked or moved away from the screen. Like, I was laughing my butt off at Richie's jokes. I mean, there's a lot of your mom style jokes, but those are totally my style. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to use that on someone. That's hilarious. So
yeah, what was it? It was like the town started off as like a beaver and tram. He's like, still is, am I right? That was one of those scenes where like it was really fast, and I was like, what? Like I laughed abruptly too loud. Like I laughed too loud. Like you could hear me anywhere in the theater laugh too loud. Yeah, that happened.
There are people mad about it though. They don't like all the sex jokes, and I'm like, that was the only part that brought enjoyment for me. Don't kill my enjoyment. I like the sex jokes.
What about you, Ben? If someone said to you, okay, other than this film, give me a good clown film to watch, a scary clown film, what do you pick?
All right, so let me couch this a little bit. I'm going to say that the original It film was the first kind of like exposure to a clown film I had, as well as kind of probably my first exposure to real horror. I was pretty young, like it really left an impression on me. I had nightmares from this. And because of that, I did have sort of like this weird fear of clowns, kind of like Shara. Because of that, I stayed away from clown movies for so long. Anything clown related, it immediately just sort of like pushed me away. Like I just couldn't handle it. But that's dissipated a little bit over time. And I got a recommendation that it might've been from you, and I'm going to steal this. And I'm sorry if this is the one you were going to pick, but the one that I'm going to have to
Eli Roth.
Huh?
Eli Roth, clown.
Yes. Yeah. So the reason I like that is because it actually just portrays the clown as a monster, and I think that just plays into my inherent sort of fear that originally came from it, that clowns are monsters. They don't even like try to make it innocent. They don't make it a facade. The clown suit is actually skin that comes from this demon monster that originated the myth and the story, and then the persona of the clown.
Yep, we're on the same page. I got two of them. Definitely, clown is good. It's a good anytime a horror film tries to do like an origin story, my red flags go up because it's like, oh god, don't do this. Halloween 87, like Michael Myers is in a crib. It's like, really, like I don't need to know that shit. Don't do that to me. Yeah, Eli Roth did a good job. By the way, that film got panned. It has a really shitty rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's better, I think, than the reviews lead you to believe. So if you guys liked it, go see Eli Roth's Clown. Stitches is also really good. And then the one that actually got me scared of clowns, guys, it wasn't actually the It miniseries, which did a lot of work in making me scared, but actually I think it was before that. I was over at a buddy's house, and we watched a movie from the 80s called Clown House. And I actually only saw it twice in my life when I was a kid, both times. And all I can tell you about it is two kids go to a circus. It's a very simple setup. They kind of live, I think, out in the middle of the woods, like in a cabinist sort of place with their family. And they go to this traveling circus, and they see these clowns, and these three clowns just kind of follow them and stare at them everywhere. And they're kind of just like, the clowns are just kind of like, they just look at them and follow. Every time they go somewhere, the clowns are kind of like looking at them, kind of studying them, like, wow, that's interesting. And they keep doing that and just follow them. They follow them all the way to their home. And then when they're in their house, they break in, and they're humans in clown costumes or nothing supernatural. And they just try to kill the kids. It's really, really scary. It's a very simple basic setup.
Simple. Mwah. That's exactly what would scare me. The perfect combo. But, I think with my clown movies, I like things where I can relate to the clown. I think it makes the clown less scary. Because the other movie I like is Vulgar. And I know this is a very low-rated film, but it's Kevin Smith, and I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. But if you guys remember Dante, my girlfriend sucked 37 dicks. It was like the only time he came back to the Kevin Smith films, and he plays a clown, and he's trying to make money, and you feel sorry for him because he's trying to make some cash, and he comes up with this hilarious idea where he could be the clown at the beginning of a strip club or a strip tease thing for bachelor parties. So they think a stripper is going to come in, and a clown comes in, and they're like, God damn it, get out of here, clown. And then a hot stripper comes in afterwards. That was his concept. He thought it'd be funny because he was doing children's parties and not making enough money. And then he gets captured by some people, and horrible things happen to him. And you're just feeling really sorry for this guy. Everybody said it was too dark and too frightening and too graphic, and they just couldn't appreciate it. And I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great, and it's dark and fucked up like me, so I like that too. But every single clown movie I like, I relate to the clown. So
okay,
the ones I don't like, I don't.
Crispin Glover. Go to YouTube, put in Crispin Glover, clowny clown clown. I don't know if you've seen it. I like Crispin Glover,
but I haven't seen that.
Okay.
And he frightens me. Crispin Glover frightens me just by existing. So.
You ever see like those YouTube? You ever like get really drunk? It's like 3 a.m. and you're on YouTube and you're like, how the fuck did I get to this video? Like you started looking up like neuropsychology shit, and then you end up on like cat videos. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of. I had an evening where that happened, and I was like, where did the internet take me? And it took me to a Crispin Glover 1970 something homemade video where I can't even describe it. So if you haven't seen it, clowny clown clown Crispin Glover, you can't unsee it. Prepare yourself. It's like 2 minutes, and you'll never be the same. Shara, I'm serious. Like, get fucked up before you see it. Okay. Yeah, did you guys have anything else you wanted to add about it? I feel like overall, we're all kind of on the same boat with this. I feel like I think we'd all agree that it was good. It wasn't fantastic. There were obvious things I think we saw that it could do better. I guess my overall criticism would be that it was safe. It was a safe Stephen King remake. It was almost like the what was it? The Star Wars that just came out, not Rogue One, but the one before, Force Awakens. Fantastic film, but it was very, very safe. Anytime you have a film that is safe, I feel like you lose points, even if it's well done. Like I think this It film has an 89, had like a 92 for Forever, which I think is way, way too high, man. To me, I felt like that was way too high just because it was just a very conservatively done rehashing of Stephen King. But to be fair, if it was ballsy and it fucked up one iota of anything, it'd have like a 25% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I get it, right? And I think it's all about money, and it sets up a sequel. So, I mean, I feel like I can pinpoint the sort of person who would go into this thinking it's an unbelievably scary film. And it's just not me. It's not the sorts of things that do it for me. I'm more of a psychological fear, but there is a place for jump scares. So it's kind of like this weird thing where it was like, give me maybe a little less jump scares, more scenes where Pennywise is doing your food, like those looks, those kind of things where he's doing this as he's coming after one of the kids. Like, give me more of that and less viscerality, and I probably would have rated this a little higher. So that's my my 2 cents for the film. If I had to rate this scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give this, and it's going to sound kind of low, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. I know it's really low, but it's because it didn't scare me that much, and it didn't have the shit that does it for me. Is it a good rehashing of a Stephen King novel? Yeah. Does it hold up there with the miniseries? In terms of the long-term fear and what it produces in people, you're not going to have people 20 years from now that talk about the remake as the film that made them scared of clowns, right? So probably not, but it's a good movie. It's just kind of like, it's a good movie, but that's kind of it. So that's my spiel.
Okay, so Stephen King apparently watched this twice and likes it. I don't give a fuck what Stephen King thinks of Stephen King shit. Obviously, he wants to get the sales up. He has when people use that as a fucking excuse for it being good, fuck you, you're dumb. You are so dumb. Stephen King also liked his remake of Langoliers, and that was probably the most hilarious thing I've ever seen in my life. The acting in it was ridiculous. I don't know if you remember the Perfect Strangers TV show where you got Balky Bartokomous, that guy, he's like peeling paper and going like getting off on it in this film, and it was so ridiculous. So, and Stephen King was okay with that remake, and it was so hilariously bad. So I don't give a fuck what Stephen King thinks of this. It wasn't scary at all. If I could give it a negative as scary, I would. It wasn't scary at all.
Now I'm going to send this to Stephen King.
Yeah, send it to him. It was funny. It was funny. It was not scary. And sometimes it was funny because, like, oh, these poor people, they made this movie, like, not scary. The children's acting was okay. It was pretty good. There were some that were just fantastic. And the sex jokes were hilarious. So would I watch it again? No. It's meh. It was so meh.
Yeah, that's my summer too. It's meh.
It was meh, and my daughter, like, she's like, well, so was it scary? And I'm like, oh no, it wasn't scary at all. It might be to you. That was exactly how I freaking told her about the film. So, and I was like, and it would definitely be scary to your friends. So yeah, would this be scary for some middle school girls? Absolutely. Would it be scary to us? Nope. It's just not up to our standards. I give it a 5. It was not that good. The acting was all right, and I cannot wait for the adult actors to come around and destroy the whole entire thing completely.
God almighty. Ben's like freaking out. He's like, please no. Please no. Yeah, I feel like there's a 1-to-1 connection with like the people who would find this film absolutely terrifying and like how much they love the Kardashians or something. Like there's definitely like a connection between there's a superficiality, I think, in this film that appeals to a lot of people in terms of horror. I'm going to sound so fucking arrogant saying that, like so la-di-da, but I'm serious. Good film. If it scared you, God bless you. Go watch the Bye Bye Man. That's all I can say. What about you, Ben? What do you think overall?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with that rating. It's going to be somewhere between like a 5 or a 6, which to be fair puts it on the same level as The Exorcist for me, just to throw that out there. But for like totally different reasons, right? I mean, like, there were big reasons why The Exorcist was both really good, but also like personally not great for me. The reason that this is like a 5 or a 6 is because it's like it legitimately just kind of like floats around the middle, I mean, it like
around the middle.
It floats. They all float down here. The thing is that, yeah, I mean, they didn't ruin it, and I'm super glad about that because they totally could have. It could have been garbage. I don't think it was garbage. It was okay. And that's honestly the biggest reason why I think that my rating on this one might change whenever I see chapter 2, and just to be totally fair, whenever you watch the original miniseries, there were things they left out too. Yes, Tim Curry's acting was great. If it wasn't for Tim Curry, that probably wouldn't have been very good either. I really think it had a lot to do with him because they don't do a lot of the development. Like even in the kid chapter, it's based on flashbacks, right? So it's like they're adults, but they're kind of like flashing back and remembering whenever they were in Derry and fought this monster. So I give it a pass on that. I think they did a standalone children chapter pretty well. But yeah, I mean, it left something to be desired. So yeah, it's going to float right around in the middle of it for me.
That's well played. Well played with the floating. I feel like guys are because it's so interesting that our scores are so low given how well this film did and how its rating on things. I think our standards are very interesting compared to sort of the standard person who goes and see horror. It's one of the reasons I was kind of nervous to create this podcast was I didn't want to seem like a douche. Like, oh, like horror films should be held to kind of a higher standard. because I think it's really cool how they produce fear in us and kind of what that says about us individually and collectively. Like, there's something cool about that. There's something worth exploring. There's something intellectual about it, but tying intellectual shit to horror films is weird. It's just really weird, right? It's just a strange thing to do. It's a very weird subculture, and most people who do reviews for this film thought it was just through the roof, right? If you go YouTube this, we'll be at the very bottom, 108,000 fucking search results, and we'll be at the bottom being like, they could have done it better. And everyone above us is going to be like, dude, best film ever. My girlfriend fucking freaked out, scared her with my Pennywise costume. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and there's Easter egg shit, and like, you're not a real Stephen King fan unless you caught this shit. But I think at the end of the day, like, deep fear, shit that lasts, is important. It's kind of cool to think about. And I think this film lacked it. And because it lacked it, I think our scores were so low. And it's interesting that all three of us collectively saw that. And I'm glad also that we didn't have the other co-hosts, Garrett and whatnot, in here, because he'd be like, 10 out of 10. It's great. It's amazing. You're all crazy. So fuck you, Garrett, for not joining. This is what you get. Yeah. So, well, thanks, guys, for doing this. I got to bounce. Kind of a short broadcast. If you liked what you saw here, check us out. Check out our other stuff. We have videos, and we do Google Hangouts pretty much every week. We do a film every week, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are doing next week a very different film than the It remake, The Seventh Seal. It is a 50s horror film, so check it out. We all basically have a list of horror films that we talk about and go through, and by the end of it, we all sort of know each other a little better, and I think that's the appeal of horror to a certain extent. I think that's worth exploring. And if you like that kind of shit, and you want to know why is it that I'm scared of home invasion films, or I'm scared of clown films, or I'm scared of psychological shit and not clown films or visceral shit, that's worth exploring. It says a lot about you. It says a lot about your fears, and it says it's very informative about you. And anything that can inform you about yourself is worth thinking about. So that's my appeal to you. If you want to watch our shit, be smart, enjoy horror movies. Get a lot out of them, and watch our stuff. We are doing The Seventh Seal. Not entirely sure what we're doing after that, but check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We post a lot of content there. We have individual videos where we go through and do reviews. We've done 4 or 5 reviews for 2017 horror films. And then we just keep doing a weekly series. So check us out. If you like what you saw, subscribe, and we will see you guys next Sunday night for our roundtable discussion. Take care.